These protests basically create an environment where we are not safe as New Yorkers, and especially in the Jewish community. They incite Jew hatred, they spread anti-Semitism, they spread lies about Israel. Some people have almost a misperception that, I think that they're not as frequent as they used to be. And they're just not reported in the press anymore. I see it more intensively targeted in a violent harassment way toward the Jewish community. There's just no consequences for any of this lawlessness. So, what used to be a misdemeanor is now, you get a pink slip, or what used to be a felony is now, we arrest you and then we let you go. So they could, in a sense, recriminalize crime. Before Monday, there was no place in City Council for having a voice on the protest or for anti-Semitism. There's one thing I want to say is that we can't look to elected officials or influencers to take our responsibility as citizens. So we the people, we have a voice, and that's the whole point.
Welcome to New York Insider. I'm Liam O'Neill. Today I sit down with Jeannie Sprenger, who is just an ordinary New Yorker who had a taste of the political life and organizing life just not so long ago. Jeannie, welcome to New York Insider.
Oh, thanks so much for having me, Liam. It's great to be here.
So it was last Monday, which was February 26th, when you went to City Hall to voice your opinion about basically feeling unsafe because of pro-Palestinian protests or anti-Israel protests in the city. But you didn't go there alone. You went there with a bunch of friends and a bunch of neighbors. Tell us why you were there and what got you there.
Well, what got me there was actually, it all started one night when I was trying to get home. I was on the Upper East Side, like around the UN, trying to get to Grand Central. And I live downtown. I was trying to, get the 4 or 5 train. And I could not get to Grand Central. And it was this feeling of terror that came over me, really, because the streets were blocked. The NYPD wouldn't let you cross the street. Nobody knew where to go. We were like these, crazed, cattle in a pen, in a sense, and nobody knew what was going on. And I could hear the chants, the banging of the drums, the yelling, and it's this sound that just really does instill fear. And that's the purpose behind it. And I thought, oh my gosh, it's these anti-Israel protesters coming. And, I've lived in New York a long time. I've lived all over the country. I've dealt with many situations. And it was probably the first time when I really felt terror. And I thought to myself, am I in America? I feel like I'm in some third world country. This reminded me of something you see in the movies. This can't be real. And I was determined to get home. I have to get home. I don't want to be on the street all night. This thing could be going on all night and I'd be stuck here alone, And I just crossed the street anyway. I was determined to get home. And after that, I thought, this is absolutely insane. This is America. What happened to the Constitution? What happened to laws? And I just started researching, and I thought there's got to be a way to put a limit to this. Free speech is one thing, but shutting down a city and taking away my rights and my freedoms and breaking the law, that's another thing. And, it just set me on this passionate journey. I started, could I sue someone or what? I didn't really know where to start, and I just started researching, and it got me to this place where I was advised that, well, the way that you can have a voice at City Council is you come to a committee meeting. I mean, I'm like everyone who I'm trying to educate now. I was one of them months ago where. Who's City Council? What do they do? I don't even know who my City Council member is. Well, I look at it from my apartment, so I knew.
You knew where that was.
That's the one thing I knew. I have that ahead of everybody else. But in terms of, I'm finding this is so common, and it doesn't matter where people are from or what their education level is. They really don't know who City Council is, what they do, who their elected official is. Everybody focuses obviously, recently, of course, on the president and Congress, but people don't focus on the local. And local is really where it's at. The local politics impacts us more than any other politics on a day-to-day basis. So I found out when the next committee hearing was, this public safety committee hearing. Public safety, because it's these protests basically create an environment where we are not safe as New Yorkers, and especially in the Jewish community. You know, they incite hatred, they incite Jew hatred, they spread anti-Semitism, they spread lies about Israel. So from all of that, you know, it just creates this unsafe environment. We see anti-Semitism skyrocketing in across the country, but especially in New York City with the population here. So it's a very serious thing. You know, there's breaking of laws, there's violation of rights, there's inciting of hatred.
You know what?
And that's why we picked the Public Safety Committee.
Right. So give me some specifics, or give our viewers some specifics.
Mm-hmm.
You just mentioned a turning point for you. You were trying to get home, and where was it? Grand Central
Yeah, I was
Station?
trying to get to Grand Central. Like,
You're trying to get to Grand Central.
Yeah.
Okay. So in other words, the station was somewhat closed down or blocked.
The streets around it were.
The streets around it, and we've seen. I think many people have seen headlines, probably a year ago or several months ago, about shutting down the Holland Tunnel.
Oh, that wasn't that long ago. Yeah.
Shutting over the Brooklyn Bridge.
Exactly.
So these are
blocking people from get to JFK from the airport.
pretty serious.
Yeah, and you're blocking
blockages.
interstate commerce. You're blocking emergency vehicles, ambulances.
Okay.
The other night, there was a bomb threat at Times Square, and the anti-Israel protesters blocked the NYPD from getting to the potential bomb. So I mean, we're talking serious violations of endangerment of of New Yorkers, and especially, as I mentioned, the Jewish community.
And then you mentioned also a rise of anti-Semitism. Do you have any stories from your network?
Absolutely. I mean, how many do you want? I mean, I have stories of women taking Uber rides and the Uber driver locking them in the car, swearing at them, calling them effing Jews, you know, being abusive toward them. I mean, there's so many stories I could tell, even just about Uber drivers, Jewish coffee shops and restaurants. People went in yesterday inside the store, ripped down pictures of the hostages. We see I saw a report this morning about a school in Brooklyn where a teacher was sent emails, just horrific, I can't even repeat, but basic, you know, worse than Holocaust type messages. So we're getting, and then we saw in Montreal, was it yesterday, anti-Israel protesters surrounded a Jewish community screaming death to Jews. You know, and so I shared that with friends today, and I said, this is coming here. You know, if we don't do something to limit these protests, you know, right now we can say, well, you know, they're just, you know, I mean, they damaged property, obviously. You know, they've damaged things in the park, Washington Square Park, and Union Square, and the public library. I mean, you see things on the street everywhere. But so they do violence. They went through Macy's with a smoke bomb. I mean, anybody else that would do that, they'd be in jail. You know, they'd be in Rikers right now. So there's just no consequences for any of this lawlessness. There's laws about protests. You know, basic things like the number of people you can have. You know, what you can do in a park, using sound systems, leaving the street halfway free for traffic,
Well,
leaving
protests
sidewalks
are
free.
permitted.
There's protest
There's a
laws.
permit process.
Yeah, and all of those being broken. I mean, laws about harassment, you know, hate speech, inciting violence, inciting riots, harassment. I have, I think I shared with you, Liam, I have lists, seriously, because there's so many things that, and false imprisonment. I mean, blocking people in their cars, they can't get across the bridge. It's really a form of kidnapping. I mean, we're talking felonies here. There's terrorism. You know, when you're blocking interstate commerce. You know, so the list goes on, but yet there are no consequences. You know, every once in a while we see the NYPD making arrests, but then they get right off. Nothing happens to them. So there's no consequences. And as a result, I'm seeing more and more, not just protests, but actually what I'm seeing, and we talked about this before, is some people almost have almost a misperception that, oh, you know, I think that they're not as frequent as they used to be, and they're just not reported in the press anymore. You know, I have to find out a lot of my sources from Twitter, from social media, because people taking their own videos of what's happening. I thought, oh, I didn't know there was I didn't even know about that. Nobody knows about that bomb threat incident that happened on Saturday. Well, that was on Twitter, but I didn't see it in the press anywhere. So one, it's not being reported. Two, I see it being, and it gets back to what we were talking about in the Jewish community, I see it more intensively targeted in a violent harassment way toward the Jewish community. People that are happen to be on the street with any clothing that would indicate that they're Jewish are being harassed, almost beaten. You know, and NYPD has to come in at the final second before the punch is thrown or before, it gets really bad, in order to try to break it up or whatever. But it's getting more intense. I mean, if you're marching through the streets, saying from the river to the sea, you're basically saying for the destruction of Israel and for the destruction of the Jewish people. So this is not a freedom of speech, First Amendment issue. This is, in fact, I did a lot of research about Supreme Court exceptions to the First Amendment, or a speech that is not protected by the First Amendment. And I looked at it, I said, they're breaking all of these.
Yeah.
They're inciting violence.
So, what,
forth.
we'll get back to the free
Yeah.
speech thing in a moment,
Yeah.
because I do have a couple of questions lined up for you that
Sure.
are, I think, I want you to voice your opinion on, including the free speech. What, in your opinion, what the limits are, and in this particular case. But before we get back there, take me back to City Hall. So you said enough is enough.
Yes.
And
we're not safe. Enough is enough.
and this is all, of course, because of this war, right? Day 140 or 50.
Well, anti-Semitism's been obviously, since the beginning of time, but
there's been an uptick since October 7th.
There's a 400% increase nationally, and I would guess even more so here. I mean, it's just not reported, but when you see it on social media, there's people in Brooklyn and every, Jewish communities, even Upper East Side, that are getting punched, that are getting hit, that are getting. I had a girlfriend that went to get I can't remember what it was, a coffee or something, and the guy called her a dirty Jew. It's just harassment and hate speech and
okay,
violence.
So yeah,
and I've got to go to City Hall.
Point made, right?
All right, let's go to City Hall.
So enough was enough.
Take me to City Hall.
Take us to City Hall.
Yeah.
What happens?
All right, so I say, okay, I'm going to get. That was a few of the council members said, if you get like 20 people, that would be great.
Okay.
Come to a committee meeting. So harder said than done, because one thing I want to say is that everybody wants to complain about the protest, but then when you give them something they can do, they don't want to do it. And there's one thing I want to say is that we can't look to elected officials or influencers to take our responsibility as citizens. So we the people, we have a voice, and that's the whole point. We have a voice, and we have to have a voice at this time. So I ended up with probably about 35 people, and we came to this public safety committee hearing it started at 10 o'clock. And it was a learning experience.
10 o'clock in the morning.
Because first they have, we would basically, the short of it is we waited over 2.5 hours to speak, So we lost a lot of the people, because people who work or have a schedule really don't have a voice at City Hall.
They had to enter at 10 o'clock for a hearing that was already scheduled for the police, right? There were 3 or 4 police.
There were NYPD
representatives
there was an oversight, because the Public Safety Committee has oversight on the NYPD, and so they were focused on wrongful conviction.
Okay, so that was the agenda item that day, but it was a public hearing, and so you said, I'm going to go.
Well, there's a place, that after the NYPD where they open it up to the public.
They open it up to the public.
So you walk in and you just put your name. You can put any name, actually. You don't have to put your name on a slip of paper, and then at the point where they open it up to the public, they just pull your name out of a hat, I guess. It's not in any order, so you don't know when you're going to get called up or who you're going to get called up with. They call up like 3 people at the same time, and you sit there in front of the committee, and you have 2 minutes. So what happened with us is we were waiting. So by the time the public part started, there were probably, I don't remember exactly, but probably 10 of us left, which was not bad, considering
down from
that
30, 35.
After waiting 2.5 hours, and you don't know. We had people saying, it could be 10 o'clock at night. So
it could be a 12-hour meeting.
So I couldn't even say to them, like, well, we're going to get called up at noon. I said, I have no idea. And I hated to say that, but I really didn't. I didn't say 10 at night because I didn't want to completely be the only one left. But so they started calling people around 12, but there were other people there that were testifying against the NYPD.
Okay.
And so then they just kind of started sprinkling in and calling us, but they said, you can only testify if you're speaking about wrongful conviction.
Because that was the topic.
Well, that was the topic.
Day.
But I was told by council members, I was advised by council members of the committee to do this. And then they told me afterward that they had never seen that happen before. Oh. So of course, I call it my group. My group was scared. They didn't know what to do. I said, don't worry. What are they going to do? Shoot you? Just go up there and talk. You know, 2 minutes, like how long is 2 minutes, you know? You can get in 2 minutes before they can drag you out of here, kind of thing. So he, the chairman, made a point to just continually say this. You know, you cannot come up unless you're speaking on wrongful conviction. So I'm sitting there texting people going, what do we do? So I thought, you know, I had some specific, and I had briefed everyone, I coached everybody, I gave them talking points, I gave them, you know, all these different things that we're talking about, like the things they're breaking. But then I also feel like it's important, obviously, to say, what is it that we're asking for? Because I didn't just want to go up there and complain. You know, I wanted to ask city council to do something about it.
So what was your big ask?
The big ask was, one, that we'd have our own hearing on the protest.
On this
so
matter
that we wouldn't be
specifically.
censored continually.
Okay.
That's one. But the other would be, you know, if they have oversight of the NYPD, then we want them to allow or take away the barriers of the NYPD to enforce the law. Because there's many, I don't know if we want to get into this here, but there's many barriers that the NYPD has for arresting people, for enforcing law, for doing what they should be doing about these protests. So city council could relieve those barriers. They, even if the NYPD arrests these people, there's no consequences. And there's been such reform in New York City in criminal justice that, and that was my point when I went up there, is that, you know, we're so concerned about wrongful conviction that we don't convict anybody. And so as a result, there's just no consequences. So, you know, what used to be a misdemeanor is now, you know, you get a pink slip. Or what used to be a felony is now, you know, we arrest you and then we let you go. You know, so, I mean, there's just no consequences. So they could, in a sense, recriminalize crime, you know, make, increase the consequences back to where they were for crime. That's something they could do. They could criminalize obstructing traffic. There's no law in the book citywide for really obstructing traffic or for shutting down bridges. So they could legislate. They're legislators, so they can legislate laws. They can add on to laws. They can amend laws. You know, so there's all those things that they can do. And then primarily they can listen to us, because what happened is every person that went up of my group, they cut them off. The chairman cut them off and said, you know, I'm sorry, but this is off topic. And I was told again by council members who had been there many years on city council, they'd never seen that happen. And I don't have evidence of this, but I have to believe it was because most of us were coming from the Jewish community and talking about how we in the Jewish community are not safe.
Okay.
And how this is inciting violence, inciting Jew hatred. And I really think there was a lot of discrimination going on, you know, and I was told that by other council members. So by the time
were you able to, with your 10 people who spoke in 2 minutes, give or take, were you able to make your ask?
Definitely, because I had the ones that were that stayed behind, they were warriors, you know, and I said, just go in there and you make your ask, and if you don't do anything, if you can't even say anything else, just say, I want a separate hearing on the protest. So
and there was an answer to that question.
So the chairman said he agreed.
He agreed.
And so when I went up, I said, you know, and what I had said before, you know, look, I understand that there's a concern about wrongful conviction, but I said, you know, the pendulum swung the other way, and now no one is convicted. And I said, we are not safe. And you are the Public Safety Committee, and your job is to ensure that New Yorkers are safe. And we're not safe, you know. And I said, and we deserve to we have a right to have a voice. And, you know, First Amendment, you know, the protesters can say anything they want, but we can't. Before Monday, there was no place in City Council for having a voice on the protest or for anti-Semitism, for that matter. So I said, you know, we have a right to have our own Public Safety Committee hearing about the anti-Israel protests and anti-Semitism that comes from it. And so he said, definitely.
Definitely.
So.
And that's on the record.
It's, you know, you can go on the City Council website and you can go on the Public Safety Committee for that day, and there's a little link that says video, and you click the video and it's all recorded. You know, we're like the very last maybe half hour of the video if you want to watch. You don't want to watch the whole thing, but and I was, you know, elated because I felt like this was a victory. And I've talked to a friend who does this type of activism, and she said, you know, oftentimes it's 2-3 years to get a meeting. You know, she goes, you were really bold. I really, you know, handed to you. I was like, thank you. You know, so since then, you know, there are many WhatsApp, and I have my WhatsApp group called Take Back NYC. That's what I started, and there are many activist WhatsApp groups where there's thousands of people that send letters, and you develop these, I'm not technical, but you develop these tiny URLs. It's like a link, and people just have to click it. The letter's already there. All they have to do is put their name. So I started flooding the chairman's office, the chairman of the Public Safety Committee, the council member, it's Councilman Salam. Just started flooding his office with email. I had all these people, I post it, and then they have the link, and it just says, please stick to your word, basically, and we testified, and we want our hearing. And so we're still waiting for that date, and we keep sending letters, we keep calling, and they have a budget meeting coming up in 2 weeks on the 20th, and so if we don't get a scheduled meeting before then we're just going to go to that meeting and speak at the budget meeting, even if it's 10 at night.
So you're going to hold him to his word. So that was a victory. You certainly tasted victory. Did others in your group taste victory? Do you think this is going to be encouraging news?
Oh, yeah. So since then, I've been making the rounds, at any kind of group I can go to.
Was it a victory lap, so to speak?
Well, I don't know if it's a victory lap, but what I would call is a wake-up call. And, I start off every talk or every time I have a chance to speak to anyone and saying, it's time to wake up. Because we don't know who city council is. We don't even know who our members is. We don't know where City Hall is. I'm trying to talk to all these people. I've got council members. I've got people. I've got the sergeant. And I'm getting all these phone calls going, I'm here. Which building is City Hall? And I'm thinking, these are educated people that have lived in the city their whole life. And I said, I don't know what to tell you. If you ask somebody. And then they asked the guard, and they pointed at the wrong. I'm just thinking, okay, next time. And the on the post of the meeting, I have to put a picture of City Hall so that I can't just say, go to City Hall. So people don't. I said, first of all, we have to
really holding their hands.
Yeah,
huh?
yeah. Oh, yeah.
Because for so long, people have been, would you say, politically unengaged?
Except at a federal level, really, I think.
And that's a theme with everything. I mean, we're, just to divert a little bit,
sure.
We've had on our show several guests talking about migrants moving into the city. And obviously that's a big issue. It's a big national issue. It could determine our presidential election, some, foresee. So it's obviously a federal issue, and everyone points to the White House.
Yeah.
But in reality, here in New York, there's a lot that makes New York a destination for migrants and not other cities.
And on the state level, too.
And on the state level, exactly.
It's interesting. Because I have my triage of to-do items. And I really want to start looking at the state as well in this whole protest issue, because there are things that the NYPD's hands are tied on, but State Patrol and National Guard has freedom to do. And I noticed that, and I think I sent it to you, I just noticed that this afternoon there was an article.
You sent me a barrage of emails, and I didn't get a chance to look at them.
I think this was actually very recent, because I just saw it. I was on the train a couple hours ago. And Governor Hochul is issuing, listen to this, National Guard for the subways to check backpacks and to make the subway safe. So I thought, wow, if she can send National Guard and State Patrol to the subway, she can certainly send them to the protests. So because they have more freedom in a sense to do what they need to do to enforce the law than NYPD does. So anyway, I'm going to look into that. And there's also a state Assemblywoman, Amato, who just introduced a bill to make obstructing, bridges and roads domestic terrorism.
Yeah.
So that's being, I believe, I have to do a little bit more research on that, but I believe that's being introduced into the Assembly. So there's things going on the state level, but it's definitely at the local level that the decisions that they make, I'm realizing that so many of these things that we walk around going, what happens to New York? Why is this happening? Why is the crime? Why is the protest? Why has nothing happened? How can they do that? It's really goes back to city council.
So you've got the bug right now.
The city council bug
for
wake
political
people up.
organizing.
Yeah, to wake people up to who has the power in the city, who can make a difference, and what their role is to make a difference. I just go back to this constitutional we the people. And of course, elected officials are critical. I mean, I'm not saying, that's not important at all, but it's a partnership. We have our elected officials, but then we have to have a voice. They're representing us. And if we don't say what we want or what we need, then how are they going to represent us? And if we have the forum to speak, if it's 2 minutes, there's a lot you can say in 2 minutes, if in a testimony. And if we have a forum of speaking for 2 minutes, who doesn't have, obviously next time we'll know a little bit better how to tell people and how long they're going to wait and that kind of thing. But still, I mean, people will show, and I notice, and I think it's, I don't know if it's like fear or what, but people will go to rallies very easily. I mean, there's one tomorrow and all my chat groups are, and that's great, but all the people who would not come to testify are going to this rally. And it's like, well, you're going to a rally, but then, people, city officials, elected officials can drive by in their tinted window cars and say like, oh yeah, that's nice. Let them rally all day long, because they're not impacting anybody.
It's kind of like screaming. It reminds me of screaming at someone on Twitter or X or
but
any
if you
social
show
media. I mean,
up
it's this
and
anonymity but does anything ever happen with that?
Actually going to City Hall, and I was sitting almost as close as we are, but face to face with the chairman, and saying, we're not safe. We want a hearing. This is your job. That makes a difference. He has to listen. What's he going to do? He can't walk out of the meeting. He has to listen to me. And so this is your... Did
you felt like he listened to you at that moment when you're sitting face to face?
Yeah, I did. I mean, he said definitely that he would have a hearing for us. I think I'd heard from other council people that he was taken back, because
Probably.
all of a sudden there's this room full of...
Well, and he's newly elected, and this is the first time he's chairing this meeting.
That's correct.
I'm assuming.
It was his first Public Safety Committee hearing.
He's a newbie.
Exactly. But I don't think they had seen that before. I mean, there's certain people that they bring in to testify. It's, it's part of the plan. And so to have people that they didn't arrange to come in, and that we had, our agenda, and that we wouldn't leave, in a sense, until we were heard, I think they were like, oh, and like I said, there was no, I mean, we've had rallies, but there was really no formal way to have a voice about the anti-Israel protests, because you're not going to see on any city council committee agenda, oh, let's see if anybody wants to talk about the protests today. It's not on there. So if they want to use that form of censorship, I mean, then there's absolutely no voice, because every committee hearing is going to be on an agenda item that they want to discuss and that they want a certain viewpoint raised. So when we came in with our own viewpoint, which is not just our own, it's the viewpoint of New Yorkers. I mean, I don't think I've ever asked another New Yorker whether they're Jewish or not, what do you think of the protests? And they thought, oh, they're great. Like, who thinks, everybody's annoyed by them. Everybody thinks, I have a friend, he works in my apartment building, but he also on the weekends works at a restaurant at Grand Central, and he said it's horrible. He loses money every weekend because they have to shut the restaurant down. So then he can't work, he can't get tips, so he's losing money. I have a friend who needed a prescription from the pharmacy. She was scared to go to the pharmacy because she lives near Hunter College and there's so many protests there. And so she couldn't get her medication,
So you found people that are not just in, for example, the Jewish community.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, obviously the Jewish community, because it's so targeted about Israel and about Jewish people and eliminating Jewish people. So it's obviously about them, but it impacts all New Yorkers. I mean, my friend is, he's a Hispanic, and he works at a restaurant in Grand Central, and he loses money. He said every weekend they shut down, and they have to they actually have to hold their clients inside the restaurant. They lock all the doors and the whole thing. And I mean, that's a form of terrorism. You're forcing people to stay. You're blocking their movement. It's a false imprisonment. He loses money.
So let me parse this.
It impacts everyone.
Parse this out a little bit. You're definitely saying, and I think most people would agree, that the NYPD needs to somehow step in to stop lawlessness.
They need to be permitted to do that. Yeah.
However, the protests, they have the First Amendment right, which we talked about earlier. They have a First Amendment right to voice their opinion, and it's a kind of a slippery slope when we are asking people to curtail people's First Amendment rights.
Absolutely.
And I'll give you an example. I mean, not a specific example. I don't want to mention other names, but I remember hearing two constitutional lawyers who happen to both be Jewish, who give very compelling arguments that you need to allow, the most obnoxious types of speech out there, so that we all have. I mean, that's the test. That's the price we pay for First Amendment right.
Good.
So how do you respond to what they would say, that this is the price we have to pay for First Amendment speech?
I would say that I support First Amendment speech all the way, and I believe that the pro-Palestinian people or protesters have the right to protest. However, the First Amendment does not protect speech that incites violence. It does not protect violent behavior. It does not protect, I think it's threats and I forget the exact language. I did some research on it, but it actually is very clear what it doesn't protect. And they are guilty of many of these things that are not protected. I mean, these protests incite violence against the Jewish. They are violent. I mean, they're destructive of the city. They're destructive of public property. They've been destructive toward individuals and toward businesses. So the First Amendment does not protect violence or speech that incites violence toward whether it's a business or a race or a minority group. So I believe that that's a cop-out, to be honest, because it doesn't, yes, the First Amendment covers the right to free speech, but does not cover the right to violence and to incite violence or violence against the group.
Understood. And that's exactly why New York City...
threats and something else. I'll think of it by the end. But
that's why New York City
harassment
has a permit to allow for protests.
Well, that's another,
have any of these protests,
issue.
Right, so have any of these protests ever gotten permits, to your knowledge?
They may have gotten permits, but not the permits that are required. For example, permits, I mean, you can just go online and it's amazing how detailed it is, but it specifies how many people, it specifies what's needed for a sound system, specifies what's needed and how many people if it's in a park. You can't block any entrances. They're constantly blocking entrances to buildings. There's like the disruption. There's just all these layers within the permit laws that they're breaking. So even if you can say like, oh, they got a permit, they didn't get a permit that was necessary for what they're doing or for how many people they have. And you're never allowed to block entire sidewalks and streets, and that's what they do. I mean, that night that I couldn't get to Grand Central, I felt that the only people that had freedom of movement were the protesters. I felt like the NYPD was blocking our rights so that they could have the right to violate everything under the sun that I've mentioned.
Sometimes the only way to get things done is to file a lawsuit. Has there been talk in your community of filing a lawsuit against New York City for loss of business?
I've been
and harassment?
To be honest, I was really really chipping away at that. I got to talk to a lawyer. I got to find out there's tort claims, blah, 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 blah. And yes, there's ways. I mean, one, almost like a class action suit. If you had a group of people who've been injured in some way and they were willing to be a part of the class action suit, sometimes it's hard to get people to do that because they just don't want to be in the news, or they don't want, they just kind of want to. They don't want, I even asked the girl.
Well, and you don't want to sue your city.
There was a girl who's
right?
abused
You want your
by
city
the Uber
to do
driver,
the right thing.
and she said, well, he knows where I live now. I'm scared to file a police
fear
report.
of reprisal.
Yeah. She's like, well, he knows where I live. So it's hard sometimes to gather those people together. There's other avenues that you can sue on. The problem is that, it takes money, it takes attorneys who are willing to do it. And I felt, like I said, I have to triage things because there's this state issue, and then there's the legal issue, and there's the city council issue. And I felt that my first step should be on what I know we can do. And that's have a voice at city council. Because the other things were like, well, maybe you can do that if you do this, and it was all these ifs. But the city council is like, this is our right, this is what we can do, there's a meeting coming up, I can mobilize. And I like to focus on what I can do, not on what I can't do, what I know and what I don't know. So I felt that's where my energy should be now. And then I want to work on a state level. And then at the same time, I'm always talking to attorneys and, having that kind of spinning in the background.
So you've taken this first bold step, and it seems like you're planning out many more to come.
Absolutely. We've just begun. I said to all the people that were there, so we've only just begun here. This is our first victory, and it's a start. And I said, before today, and before that Monday, we didn't have a voice at City Hall. We didn't have a voice with City Council. There wasn't even a way to have a voice about the anti-Israel protests.
Do you have hope that City Council will
I do,
hear
because
you?
I have hope that, because I know that I don't give up. And if I don't give up, then I'm not going to lead anybody else to give up. And I'm leading this effort, and you can't give up. You can't give up, and you can't be in fear. Because we have the truth, we have the rights, and that's what America's all about.
And you have faith in our government, including the City Council, to rectify things to the extent that you'll feel safe again.
I think that's their job. And we sometimes forget, we pay them. So in a sense, we are the employers, they're our employees. Mm-hmm. And so if we're paying them to keep us safe and they're not, then we need to find some new employees. We'll leave it at that.
We'll leave it at that. Thanks so much for coming on the show, Jeannie.
Sure, Liam. Thanks so much for having me. It's been great.